The napkin was still folded in my hand when his fingers closed around my wrist. Not hard. Not soft either. The kind of grip that says don't make this a scene. 240 guests behind him, all white linen and candlelight, all pretending not to watch. Just for tonight, he whispered, close enough that I could smell the champagne on his breath. Stand near the wall. I looked past him at the place card with my name on it, my name in gold script, sitting at a table I would never be allowed to reach. Somewhere in that ballroom, a woman in a violet dress was already lowering herself into my chair like she'd been rehearsing it for months. I smiled. I always smile right before I start counting. My name is Marion Cole. I'm 53 years old, and 11 years ago I turned a single dry cleaning storefront on Route 9 into a laundry and linen supply company that now services 14 hotels and 3 hospital systems across the county. Cole Linen Services grossed $3.1 million last year. I built it from a $22,000 loan I took out against my own condo, back when my ex-husband told me it would fail in 6 months. It didn't fail. He did. I have one brother, Derek, younger by 4 years, and for most of our lives the golden one, the one our mother called the smart one, at every Thanksgiving like I wasn't standing right there holding the turkey platter. When our father died, he left the two of us equal shares in a piece of land off Route 12 worth roughly $410,000. Equal on paper. I'll get to what that meant in practice. Derek was getting married that night to a woman named Priya Shah, a real estate developer 12 years his junior with a very specific interest in undeveloped land. I'd co-signed a $50,000 loan for Derek's catering business 2 years earlier, a business that, as I would soon learn, no longer technically existed. I walked into that wedding as the sister who built something from nothing. I walked out 3 hours later as a woman who had just been told, politely, to disappear. The seating chart had been printed on heavy cream cardstock and propped on a gilded easel at the entrance to the Somerset Manor ballroom. I found my name easily, Marion Cole, table 3, seat 4, right beside our Aunt Ruth and 2 cousins I actually liked. Then Derek's wedding planner, a brisk young woman with a headset and a clipboard, intercepted me at the door with an apologetic wince. There's been a small adjustment, she said, not meeting my eyes. Your brother wanted to handle it personally. He was waiting by the gift table, in a tux that cost more than my first month's rent back in 2015, a champagne flute already sweating in his hand. That's when he took my wrist. That's when he said the wall. Over his shoulder I watched Priya's cousin, a woman I'd met exactly once at an engagement brunch, wearing a violet dress that probably cost 4 figures, settle into seat 4 at table 3 like it had always been hers. She didn't even glance my way. She reached for the wine list and asked the server, in a voice pitched just loud enough to carry, "Is the seating usually this family heavy?" I heard the sisters a bit much. Derek laughed. An actual laugh, low and easy like it cost him nothing. I stood near the wall in my navy dress, holding a champagne flute I never touched, and I watched my own brother's wedding happen to someone else's sister. Beat won the toast. 2 hours in, Derek gave his best man-style toast to his own bride, thanking everyone who believed in us from the beginning. He listed Priya's parents, her business partners, his college roommate. He did not say my name. I smiled near the wall and started paying attention the way I do when a client's invoice doesn't add up. Beat 2, the business that wasn't there. 3 days after the wedding, I drove past the address for Derek's catering company, Cole & Company. Catering, the business I'd co-signed $50,000 for, expecting to see the commercial kitchen he'd shown me photos of. Instead I found a nail salon. The building manager, a tired man named Felix, told me flatly that no catering business had leased that unit in over a year. Guy came by sometimes to take photos out front, he said. Never went inside. I didn't call Derek. I called my accountant, Preeti, instead, and asked her to quietly pull whatever public filings existed on Cole & Company. Beat 3, the confrontation and the jargon. I invited Derek to lunch. He arrived 20 minutes late in a new watch I didn't recognize and ordered the $38 Branzino without looking at the menu. The kitchen, I said, keeping my voice level, on Route 40. It's a nail salon now. He didn't even blink. We pivoted the operational model, he said, swirling his water like it was wine. Ghost kitchen structure, third-party fulfillment, asset-light approach. It's actually a much smarter margin play than a fixed lease. Priya's people ran the numbers. I nodded slowly, the way you nod at a child explaining why the dog ate his homework. That makes sense, I said. Thanks for clarifying. I believed exactly none of it. But I've learned that the moment you let someone see you doubt them, they stop talking. And I needed him to keep talking. Beat 4, what the filings actually said. Preeti called me on a Tuesday night, her voice careful in the way accountants get right before they deliver something ugly. Cole & Company. Catering had been dissolved by the state 14 months earlier for failure to file. The $50,000 loan I'd co-signed hadn't gone anywhere near a kitchen. Bank records Preeti could legally access as a co-signer showed transfers, $18,000 to a wedding venue deposit at Somerset Manor, $11,000 to a jeweler in the city, and the rest siphoned out in a pattern of even round withdrawals that looked exactly like someone building a cash cushion. My name was still on that loan. My credit. My liability. Beat 5, overheard at the wall. I went back to Somerset Manor a week later to settle my own catering account for an unrelated hotel contract. Small world, same venue. And I was walking past a service hallway when I heard Priya's voice through a half-open door, bright with laughter. She actually thanked me for taking her seat. Priya was saying to someone, probably her cousin in the violet dress. Stood by that wall the whole night like a coat rack. Honestly, once we're through probate on that land, I don't think we'll be seeing much of dear Marion at all. Probate. Not a word people use about land that isn't already halfway into their name. I stood very still in that hallway, invisible the way people become when they've decided to be underestimated on purpose, and I understood for the first time that this had never been about a wedding seat. It was about my father's land, and they were already dividing it up. I made a decision in that hallway, and I made it calmly, the same way I decide whether to renew a hotel contract. I would let them believe they'd won. 2 weeks later, I called Derek and asked to meet, not at a restaurant this time but at his house, to talk about the land since everyone seems so interested in it lately. I let a small tremor into my voice on the phone. I am not a woman who trembles. I made sure he heard one anyway. I dressed down for that visit. A cardigan instead of my usual blazer. I left my good watch at home and wore my late mother's plain wedding band instead. A detail I knew would land because Derek had once told Priya within my hearing that Marion gets sentimental, it's kind of sad. I let my hands shake slightly around my coffee cup at his kitchen table. I said things like, I don't really understand all this legal paperwork, Derek. You were always better with that than me. I asked him twice to repeat simple explanations, and thanked him for his patience. Let him think confusion is my whole personality now, I told myself, watching him lean back in his chair with the loose, satisfied posture of a man who believes he's already won. A woman who doesn't understand the numbers doesn't check the numbers. A woman who's grateful for scraps doesn't count them. Derek relaxed into that lie like it was a warm bath. Priya started calling me sweet, instead of avoiding me. They stopped lowering their voices around me entirely. That was the whole plan. I hired a forensic accountant named Walter Sue, quiet, precise, the kind of man who reads bank statements the way other people read novels, and paid him out of pocket to build a clean, dated paper trail linking the $50,000 loan to Somerset Manor and the jeweler, and linking a second, smaller transfer to a title company that had, 3 weeks earlier, begun quietly processing paperwork to add Priya's name to the deed of my father's land, using a power of attorney Derek had drafted while I was too overwhelmed by grief to deal with legal matters. I never signed that power of attorney. I never saw it, which meant one of two things: forgery or something worse. I asked Walter to trace the notary's stamp on the document. It came back registered to a notary public who, according to the state licensing board, had surrendered her commission 8 months prior for unrelated reasons and hadn't notarized anything since. The document was fake. My brother had forged my signature to try to sign away half my father's land. I set the bait carefully. I told Derek and Priya over another cardigan and tremble lunch that I was finally ready to just sign whatever makes this easier regarding the land, and that my lawyer, a real one, whose existence I mentioned for the first time, would need one quick family dinner to go over a few loose ends before anything was finalized. I framed it as my idea, my exhaustion, my surrender. I asked Walter to be there as just a family friend helping with the paperwork. I had my actual attorney, Denise Okafor, seated at that table under the same modest cover story. And in my handbag, resting against my hip the entire evening, sat a small recorder, legal in our state with one-party consent, which meant I only needed my own. The night before the dinner, my phone buzzed once under my kitchen table with a text from Denise. "Everything's filed. Whenever you're ready." I sat with that message glowing in the dark for a long time, feeling something that wasn't quite triumph yet. Just readiness. The dinner was at Derek and Priya's new house. The one I now knew, partly funded by money meant for a kitchen that never existed. 12 people at the table. Aunt Ruth, the cousins, Priya's parents, Derek at the head, pouring wine like a man auditioning for a toast he'd already rehearsed. Priya waited until the entree to start. "You know," she said, cutting her chicken without looking up, "once the land transfer finalizes, it might actually make sense for you to downsize, Marion. That condo's a lot of upkeep for someone your age living alone." Derek smiled into his wine glass. "She's right. You should let us handle things going forward. It's a lot for you." A small, appreciative laugh went around the table. Aunt Ruth looked uncomfortable and said nothing. I set down my fork. I did not raise my voice. I have never needed to. "I'd like everyone to hear something," I said, and I reached into my handbag and set the small recorder on the white tablecloth, right beside the centerpiece. "This is Priya 3 weeks ago, in a hallway at Somerset Manor." I pressed play. "Once we're through probate on that land, I don't think we'll be seeing much of dear Marion at all." Her own voice, bright and careless, filled the dining room. Derek's smile did not move, but everything behind it did. "This," I continued, calm as a woman reading a grocery list, "is a forged power of attorney with my signature on it, notarized by a woman who surrendered her license 8 months before this document was dated." I set a printed copy beside the recorder. "This is a forensic trace of the $50,000 I co-signed for a catering business that was legally dissolved before a single dollar of it touched a kitchen. $18,000 of it went straight into this wedding, and $11,000 into a ring on Priya's hand." I looked at my brother, and for the first time all evening, I let something sharpen in my voice. Not loud, just precise. "You told me to stand near the wall, Derek. So I did. I stood there quietly enough that you both forgot walls have ears." Denise Okafor, seated calmly beside Ruth the entire meal under the guise of a family friend, set down her own napkin and identified herself properly for the first time. My attorney, present to formally notify the table that a fraud complaint and forgery report had already been filed with the county the day before, alongside a police report for identity-related forgery. Right on cue, as if the universe itself had read the script, 2 officers who'd been asked to arrive discreetly at 8:45 knocked at the front door. Priya's fork clattered against her plate. I picked up the fake power of attorney document from the table, held it up once so the room could see it clearly, and tore it cleanly in half. "That land was my father's gift to both of us," I said, laying the torn halves beside my untouched wine glass. "Not a bargaining chip for a woman in a violet dress who thinks probate is a punchline." Nobody at that table laughed this time. In the 6 weeks that followed, the consequences moved fast, the way they do once the truth finally has somewhere to land. Derek was charged with forgery and identity fraud related to the falsified power of attorney. He took a plea deal that included restitution of the $50,000 loan in full, 18 months of probation, and a permanent mark on a record that had, until then, been spotless. The bank froze the joint account tied to my original co-signature within 72 hours of Denise's filing, and I was formally released from liability on the loan 2 months later. Priya's real estate firm, once they learned she'd attempted to fraudulently attach herself to the deed of land she had no legal claim to, quietly let her go by mutual agreement. The kind of phrase companies use when they mean we found out and we're scared of the headline. 2 of her biggest clients, both hotel groups I happen to already do business with, pulled their listings from her within the month. Small industries talk. The notary who'd surrendered her license and then apparently agreed to backdate a stamp for a fee was referred separately for investigation. I never learned what happened to her, and honestly, I stopped tracking it. Some threads aren't mine to pull. Not everyone at that table deserved what Derek and Priya got. Aunt Ruth called me the next morning, shaken and apologetic, insisting she'd had no idea. I believed her. She'd looked genuinely sick when the officers knocked. I told her the truth. None of this was about her, and she was welcome at my table any time, no wall required. I also quietly covered the deposit Ruth had already put down for a joint anniversary gift for Derek and Priya, so she wouldn't lose the money over a marriage that was now unraveling in family court. It cost me $600. It cost me nothing at all compared to what I'd gotten back. The land in the end stayed exactly what my father intended. Split evenly, cleanly, legally between his two children. Derek kept his half. I made sure of that myself in writing the week after the plea deal. I didn't fight him for it. I never wanted his half. I only ever wanted mine respected. It was raining the night Derek showed up at my door, 4 months later. No watch. No tux. A duffel bag with a broken zipper, and a coat that wasn't warm enough for October. Priya had left within weeks of the plea deal, taking what she could and leaving the house in his name and the debts in his voice. "Marion," he said, water running off his collar. His eyes doing that thing they used to do when we were kids, and he wanted me to fix something he'd broken. "I don't have anywhere else. Just for a few nights. Please." I stood in my own doorway, warm light behind me, and I looked at my brother the way I imagine he never once looked at me at that wedding. "You had a seat at my table for 53 years, Derek?" I said, quiet, steady, no tremor in it this time. That had only ever been a costume. "You're the one who decided I belonged near the wall. I'm not moving you to a chair I don't have to give." I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, the way you close something that's finally fully done. My husband, Tom, was waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea already poured, like he'd known exactly when I'd need one. He didn't ask what happened. He just slid the second mug across the counter and said, "Sit wherever you want tonight." I did. Right in the middle of my own table, where I'd always belonged. Here's what I learned standing near that wall. People will always show you exactly how much space they think you deserve. And the strongest thing you can do isn't to shout for a bigger seat. It's to quietly gather the proof, and let them hand you the whole table themselves. Grace isn't the same as weakness, and patience isn't the same as forgetting. Have you ever had to play small on purpose just to watch the truth do the loud part for you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this one hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next story.